Pin will not be weaponized.
You know what? You know what?
What's funny about this?
I'll say to the chairman.
What's funny about this?
Chairman, you know what the answer is? And I think I understand why the Attorney General does not want to answer the question. Because you eliminated the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team last year. So I understand why you don't want to tell the American people who works there.
Yeah, I understand why you don't want to talk about Mohammed Solomon in your district.
In any event,
who murdered people.
Mr. Chairman, all right, before we even get into the details, you need to see how far this hearing spirals. Because in a moment, you'll watch, Rep. Neguse corners Attorney General Pam Bondi so aggressively that she starts swinging at shadows, reaching for anything except a straight answer. This exchange isn't calm. It isn't procedural. It's a slow-motion collapse of authority right in front of the cameras, and Neguse doesn't just push. He drills. From the very start, you can feel Bondi's footing slipping. And the reason is simple. Neguse shows up with specifics. Names. Dates. Video footage. And he lands hit after hit on one central theme. Credibility, because here's the hook. When the nation's chief law enforcement officer is questioned about hiring a man caught on body cam allegedly yelling "kill him" at police on January 6th, and her response is to hide behind a Trump pardon, that's not strength. That's evasive damage control. You'll see it for yourself. Watch how Bondi tries to position the pardon like a protective shield, as if the political decision of a former president excuses the moral consequences in the present. And watch how Neguse refuses to let that slide. This hearing becomes a real-time test of whether Bondi can maintain control when confronted with the contradictions she walked into. Spoiler, she cannot. And trust me, when we hit the cryptocurrency section, that's where everything melts down. You're going to see an attorney general avoid a basic staffing question with the desperation of someone trying not to trip an alarm. Neguse presses, how many people work for the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team? A basic question, not political, not philosophical, just, how many people are on the team? And Bondi simply won't answer. Not because she doesn't know, but because answering exposes something she does not want on the record. And when Neguse reveals why he thinks she's dodging, that's the moment you saw in the teaser. It detonates. Stick with this. Because what you're about to watch is a case study in losing control at the witness table, and a reminder that once a lawmaker gets momentum, the witness no longer drives the exchange. They can only absorb the hits.
The one who was in the police-worn body cam footage, the one allegedly yelling "kill him" at police officers on January 6th, his name is Jared Wise.
He does work for us.
He works for you at the Department of Justice.
He does.
This is an individual whom a federal grand jury indicted for 2 felonies and 4 misdemeanors related to his participation in the attack on January 6th. One of those charges was forcibly assaulting, resisting, opposing, impeding, intimidating, and interfering with police with the intent to commit another felony. This is who you choose as the chief law enforcement officer of the United States of America to hire at the Department of Justice. Someone on video yelling "kill him" at police officers, right?
I believe he was pardoned by President Trump.
Oh, he was pardoned. You're right. You're right. Pardoned by President Trump for his offense. Pardoned for yelling "kill him" at police officers. And yet you expect hardworking police officers across the country to believe that you take law enforcement seriously. You could imagine the reaction of so many folks across the country hearing the chief law enforcement officer of the United States refuse to even condemn what that individual whom you've now hired did. But in any event, let's talk a little bit about some of the other divisions within the Department of Justice and what's happened over the last year. You're familiar with the Public Integrity section of the DOJ's criminal division. I think it's referred to as PIN. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know which presidential administration?
Okay, pause there. Because that sequence sets the entire tone. Look at how Rep. Neguse opens, no throat clearing, no procedural fluff, no hesitation. He goes straight to the most volatile question in the entire hearing. The Department of Justice hiring a man indicted for multiple offenses tied to January 6th, including being caught on body cam allegedly yelling "kill him" at police. And Bondi's response? Notice the pattern. Rather than address the hiring decision, rather than explain how this squares with her public commitment to law enforcement, she reaches back to Trump's pardon like it's a get-out-of-accountability card. Watch the phrasing. I believe he was pardoned by President Trump. She says it like that single line is supposed to make the issue evaporate. But it doesn't erase what's on the footage, and Neguse knows it. He immediately reinforces what that video shows, the alleged call to violence against police. He reminds her that she hired him. And then he goes to the heart of the credibility crisis. How can police officers across the country trust the DOJ if the top official won't even condemn what this individual allegedly did? That's where you feel the shift. Bondi tries to move on. Neguse refuses. This is momentum, and it's not on her side. Watch how she keeps slipping into vague phrasing, trying to dilute the moment. In any event, let's talk about other divisions. Those are escape hatches. Those are signals that the witness wants out of the conversation because the conversation is going badly. But Neguse isn't done. He pivots to structure, to oversight, to the internal organs of the DOJ, specifically the public integrity section. Why? Because he's building a pattern. He's not just suggesting Bondi made a questionable hire. He's suggesting she fundamentally weakened the department meant to police corruption. He cites numbers. 35 people when she arrived, 2 people now. That's not rhetorical flourish. That's data. And it lands. By this point, Bondi's demeanor has shifted entirely. She's not controlling the exchange. She's reacting, interrupting, scrambling for a lane. And the subtext is brutal. If she can't clearly explain staffing collapses inside her own DOJ, how is she supposed to defend its integrity? This first section ends right at the moment Neguse pivots to an entirely new line of attack, cryptocurrency enforcement. And the tension is already high, but the fireworks are still coming. And you'll feel the fuse as soon as we go back into the footage.
That individual whom you've now hired did. But in any event, let's talk a little bit about some of the other divisions within the Department of Justice and what's happened over the last year. You're familiar with the public integrity section of the DOJ's criminal division. I think it's referred to as PIN. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know which presidential administration under which the PIN was first created?
I can tell you what administration that the weaponization was ended under.
I'll reclaim my time. This wasn't a trick question.
You don't get to
Attorney
reclaim
General.
your time.
Madam Attorney General.
Because I don't like it.
Mr. Chairman, will you explain to the witness that he does reclaim his time?
Because I don't answer a question to your satisfaction?
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Attorney General, the time belongs to the gentleman from Colorado.
The president under which PIN was created was Gerald Ford. It was created after Watergate. I'm not asking a question, Madam Attorney General. The administration under which it was created was Gerald Ford. When you first started as the Attorney General of the United States, there were 35 people working in that office. There are now 2 people working in that office because you have gutted it. How many people work for the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team in the criminal division today?
Can I answer the question about PIN?
I've asked you a question. How many people work?
You've asked me a question, but you don't want the answer.
How many people work for the
answer
National
your questions the way you
Cryptocurrency
want.
Enforcement Team? You won't answer how many
I'll
people?
answer PIN.
You.
PIN will not be
you know what?
weaponized.
You know what?
What's funny about this?
I'll say to the chairman.
What's funny about this?
Chairman, you know what the answer is? And I think I understand
funny
why the
about
Attorney General
this?
does not want to answer the question. Because you eliminated the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team last year. So I understand why you don't want to tell the American people who works there.
Yeah, I
no one
understand
works
why
there
you don't want to
anymore,
talk about
Madam
Mohammed
Attorney
Solomon
General.
in
So,
your district.
In any event,
who murdered people.
Mr. Chairman, will you stop the clock so his time is not wasted by the witness?
I've been very generous with allowing extra time when we have these little disputes.
I understand.
You got the time, Mr. Neguse.
I might as well ask the chairman these questions.
I'd be happy to answer some of your questions.
What's profound, the questions I've asked,
the crime in your district.
asked, Mr. Chairman, are not trick questions. They're not gotcha questions. They're actually basic questions about how the Department of Justice functions and the unwillingness of this Attorney General to answer them in good faith. When a member of Congress asks how many people work at the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team and the Attorney General refuses to answer it, it is not a coincidence. It's because she eliminated the team. Why? Because her boss, the President of the United States, is making money hand over fist, $1.4 billion over the course of the last year, through cryptocurrency holdings. I think what is happening at the Department of Justice is a disgrace, Mr. Chairman, and I would urge you to gain control of this hearing.
That went off the rails fast, and not because Neguse changed tactics, but because Bondi ran out of escape routes. Let's walk through what just happened, because this is where the hearing fully snaps open. Neguse asks a question anyone in Bondi's position should be able to answer with a number, even a rough estimate. How many people work for the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team? This is basic oversight, not partisan, not ideological, just name the number. And Bondi won't do it. She keeps trying to back up, to pivot, to answer the previous question instead. Watch that dynamic closely. When a witness tries to answer yesterday's question to avoid answering today's one, they are not controlling the exchange anymore. They're stalling. Neguse calls it out instantly. You've asked me a question, but you don't want the answer. That's the moment the tone shifts from prosecutorial to confrontational. And the more she resists, the more he presses. Then he drops the reveal, the reason she won't answer. He claims the team was eliminated last year. Now remember, the narrator isn't saying it's true. Neguse is. And he's using it as a hammer. Suddenly, the silence makes sense. If the team was dismantled, admitting it publicly would validate Neguse's entire argument. And the Attorney General does not want to let that out on camera. But here's where the meltdown happens. Instead of denying it clearly or explaining it, Bondi veers into a completely different lane, referencing someone in Neguse's district, dragging in unrelated accusations, trying to muddy the water. That right there is the sign of a witness losing command of the moment. A confident official clarifies, a scrambling one throws static, and when she starts tossing out the unrelated name, Neguse stops the momentum and calls for the chair to stop the clock. That is a power move. It freezes the damage. It signals to the room that he sees the deflection, and he's not letting the witness run down his time with noise. Bondi tries to frame his questions as trick questions. But watch what he says back. They're not trick questions. They're not gotcha questions. They're basic questions about how the department functions. That line hits because he's right. Every question he asked was straightforward, and her refusal to answer became the story. Then Neguse drops the final accusation. His claim that the president is making money through crypto and that Bondi dismantled the enforcement team because of it. Whether that claim is supported or not is irrelevant for the purpose of understanding this exchange. The point is, he says it on the record, to her face, to the cameras. And what does Bondi do? Nothing. She has no counter-offensive, no rebuttal, no pushback. By the end, she isn't steering the conversation, she's absorbing blows and waiting for the clock to run out. That is the moment of collapse. This hearing wasn't about obscure regulatory mechanics. It wasn't about crypto. It wasn't about staffing numbers. It was about credibility. Who had it? Who lost it? And who exposed the gap? Neguse walked in with specifics. Bondi walked in with defenses. Only one of those strategies held up under pressure. Let's zoom out for a moment and make this clear. When a lawmaker asks a cabinet-level official basic structural questions, staffing, divisions, responsibilities, and the official refuses to answer any of them, that's not an accident. That's not miscommunication. That's control slipping away. And the most revealing part? Bondi didn't get cornered by hypotheticals or hypotheticals. She got cornered by her own decisions. Neguse used her own numbers, her own hires, her own organizational changes, and pressed until the contradictions surfaced. That's why the room got tense. That's why the chair had to intervene. And that's why this exchange went viral, because every time Bondi avoided a question, she made the question louder. Every time she dodged a number, the absence of that number became evidence. Every time she tried to pivot, Neguse pulled her back to the point. And by the final minute, the contrast was undeniable. You had one person demanding clarity, and another person fighting to keep the conversation foggy. This wasn't a clash of ideology. It was a clash of transparency. And in hearings like this, the side refusing to answer rarely walks out stronger. If you want more breakdowns like this where powerful people get pressed on the record, Hit subscribe and drop your take in the comments. Who do you think came out stronger in this hearing? And what was the one moment that changed